Hello. Hello and welcome to Prime Minister's Questions. Let's get into it, shall we? Number one has just been asked. Don't know what number one is, but it's usually to list the Prime Minister's engagements for the day.
Mr. Speaker, this morning,
hello, Graham and all. More Tory lies heading our way.
To my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Crystal Wall. Mr. Speaker, the wealth of billionaires has skyrocketed over the past decade, whilst average working households in the UK have the lowest living standards since the 1950s.
Wow.
Whilst hard-working families are struggling to make ends meet, the wealthy are playing by a different set of rules, with reports even that members of the House of Lords are trying to exploit the non-dom status loophole to avoid paying their fair share.
Does that come as any surprise to anyone?
Does the Prime Minister agree that whether you're the wife of the most powerful man in the country or the host of The Apprentice, no billionaire should qualify for special tax treatment, while my constituents
he's
face
talking
soaring
here
levels of
about Alan Sugar, isn't he?
Poverty.
Alan Sugar voting for how much tax he has to pay.
The facts tell a very different story to what the honourable gentleman
Oh,
said.
do they?
He mentioned
What, the made-up facts that you just made up?
Than it was in 2010.
Bullshit.
He mentioned the number.
He's lying. He's just stood up and lied. He's just done that.
Again, I'm pleased to say
he's just stood up and lied. Stop lying.
In poverty today
what?
In 2010, including many in
the population has grown, you duplicitous coward.
Which is why we've put in place record support to help families, particularly with
record
their energy
support,
bills,
my
and
arse.
particular for the most vulnerable in our society, with record amounts of cost of living payments going to millions across the country, including in Scotland, showing the power of the United Kingdom government.
Lies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thanks to this Conservative government, we have the opportunity to be the first country in the world to end new cases of HIV by 2030. And this is partially down to our world-leading opt-out HIV testing programme rolled out in very high prevalence areas. But to reach this goal and make this progress, we must roll out opt-out testing to other high prevalence areas like in the West Midlands, which includes my constituency of West Bromwich East. So will the Prime Minister...
Not going to be your constituency much longer, my friend.
And the incredible Terence Higgins Trust to hear more about the merits of opt-out testing.
Prime Minister. Well, can I thank my honourable friend for raising this important issue and indeed thank her for her work in this area. We remain absolutely committed to ending new HIV transmissions within England by 2030.
Did you have diseases bad on your bingo card? Because you can take it off.
Indicates the opt-out testing programme has been.
Does my right honourable friend agree with me that AIDS is bad?
Programme with a view to deciding whether it should be expanded in additional areas.
But, you know, we'll pull out of Horizon for a couple of years because of ideology.
Leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer.
Alright, come on, Keir, knock him dead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in his words about Clerk of the House? Mr. Speaker,
where is he going to start?
I pay tribute to the police who tracked down the escaped terror suspect from Wandsworth Prison last week. Despite being charged with terrorism and despite being a flight risk, he was not held in a Category A prison.
Wow.
Why not?
Prime Minister.
Well,
Tory cuts.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the police and their partners for their efforts to find and arrest Daniel Khalif. There is now an ongoing legal process that must be allowed to take its course.
Answer the question.
But I'd like to reassure the public that while these cases are extremely rare, the Justice Secretary has launched an internal investigation about how this could happen, as well as an independent investigation of the incident, so that we can learn the lessons from this.
So you're not going to answer the question.
And make sure that it never happens.
We need an investigation. Cop out.
The truth is they're presiding over mayhem in the criminal justice system. Only a few short months ago, Zara Alina's family said ministers had, and this is their words, blood on their hands after probation failures that led to her murder. So it beggars belief that we're back here once again. The Chief Inspector of Prisons said conditions in Wandsworth are so bad it should be shut down. The Chancellor is telling anyone who'll listen that he raised concerns months ago. Probation, school buildings, now prisons. Why does the Prime Minister keep ignoring the warnings until it's too late?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman with his background should know better that because of
okay. What? You should know better than blaming the Tories for all the Tory cuts.
Because of the wide variety and considerable difference in severity of people charged under that Act, it is not and has never been the policy that they are all held in Category A prisons, something that I shouldn't need me to point out to him given his experience. But he talks about...
No, we're talking about Tory cuts here. Tory cuts.
Over the last few years, we have delivered an extra 4,000.
Oh, delivered! If you had that on your PMQs bingo, you can tick it off. You said delivered.
Are up by 25% in the past 6
just over
years.
5 minutes in, he said the word delivered.
We're boosting prison pay, we're also improving retention, and at the same time investing £100 million to improve prison security with new measures like X-ray body scanners. But if he wanted to have a truly honest debate about this, perhaps he'd acknowledge that prison escapes under the Labour government were almost 10 times higher.
Oh, it did worse under Labour. Tick that one off as well. Away, you 3-inch fool. In Labour, it was worse.
And it will continue this week. Who
No one
wants
can
to
remember
start
that long
this
ago.
session by leaving? Please do so. I'm happy to help you on your way. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, every week, whatever the topic, he paints this picture as if everything is great and fine out there. It's so at odds with the lived experience in the real world. Let me turn to another serious security concern. Some in this House face sanction, intimidation and threats from the Chinese state. When I asked the Prime Minister on Monday whether the Foreign Secretary raised the specific issue of the alleged spy arrested in March when he visited China a few weeks ago, the Prime Minister would only say that he raised that type of activity, but avoided specifics. So I asked the Prime Minister again, did the Foreign Secretary raise this specific case when he visited China? Yes or no?
Mr. Speaker, I'll refer to my previous answer where I've said very clearly.
Okay, so not yes or no.
Raised these issues with the,
it's like
with
a game,
the Chinese
innit?
Foreign Minister,
You can't say yes or no.
as did I when I had my meeting
Yes or
with
no
Premier
game.
Li over the weekend. But when it comes to China, Mr. Speaker, this government has put in place the most robust policy that has existed ever in our country's foreign policy. It is to protect our country, to protect our country for the values and interests that we stand up for.
What are you going to protect?
It is to align our approach with our closest allies, including those in the G7 and the Five Eyes, and is to engage where it makes sense, either to advance our interests or, as I did at the weekend, to raise our very significant concerns. That is the right approach to China. It is one that is welcomed by each and every single one of our allies.
And we're delivering.
And I'd be interested to know what he thinks that he would do differently.
Keir Starmer.
Well, that certainly wasn't a yes. And what he says now is totally at odds with the Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee report of July this year. That set out that the government has no clear strategy when it comes to China, has failed to support the intelligence agencies, and is leaving the UK severely handicapped in managing our future security. This has been raised time and time again. But yet again, the Prime Minister fails to heed the warnings and is now desperately playing catch-up. So
oh, look at him! Look at his face! Oh, that was a great cutaway. Oh, look at him looking downcast.
So many in this House have so long demanded.
What would you do? What would you do? It's literally just what he just said.
Just playing catch-up and hasn't caught up with the reality.
Well, what would you do in my place? Come on, I need some help here.
Report. Again, if he actually went through it, he would realise that it related to a period of investigations which was in 2019 and 2020.
When your party were in power!
A whole new integrated review refresh of our China strategy. It's published. We've put in place a range of new measures, including, for example, the National Security Protective Agency, which is staffed out of MI5, supporting businesses and organisations and being alert to the risk from cyber and from China. But if he wants to talk about foreign policy, Mr. Speaker, he should perhaps reflect on his own record, because this was the man who said
Labour
he was 100% behind the former Labour leader. A person
Jeremy Corbyn. He's mentioned Jeremy Corbyn. Put that on your.
From NATO. It's clear what he
put that on your bingo card.
Ahead of Britain's.
We'll make animations for next week when he just does the same thing over and over again.
Probation, prison, schools, China, yet again inaction.
China
fails to heed the warning
In action, man.
Everyone else for the
In action, man.
Mr. Speaker,
That's
on
what they used to call
Sunday,
Corbyn.
the Home Secretary celebrated her first anniversary in post. That is, if you overlook the 6 days she missed when she was deemed a national security risk. In that year, 40,000 people have crossed the channel on a small boat.
40,000.
The taxpayer is now spending £6 million a day on hotel bills.
Wow.
He's failing to stop
Under
terrorists
Hair Watch.
strolling out of prison, failing to guard Britain against hostile actors. He's completely failing to stop the boats. How can anyone trust him to protect the country?
Well, Mr. Speaker, he talks
PMQs,
about
different
trust.
questions,
He talks
same
about
inane lies
action.
over and
Just
over again.
Today, this government is taking action.
This government
to
is
reform
delivering.
defective EU laws to unlock over 100,000 homes, boosting our economy, supporting
What's that
jobs,
got to do with the
and
EU?
ensuring that we
Absolutely
can realise the
nothing.
aspirations of
Just
home
talking out of his
owners.
arse.
Now, he talks about trust. He tried
Won't
in
the
this
EU
House to
stop
talk
us building
the talk
houses,
on house
mate?
building. But at the first sign of a cheap political hit, what did he do? He's caved in, Mr. Speaker. Rather than make the right long-term decisions for the country, he's taken the easy way out. It is typical of the principles-free, conviction-free type of leadership that he offers. Flip-flopping from being
Are
a
you the
builder
guy who said
to a
stop the
blocker.
boats and hasn't stopped the
Mr.
boats?
Speaker, the British public can't trust a word he says.
You are in charge.
Mr. Speaker,
My God, sorry, I'm just going to put... Yeah, he's just going to say every week. Seriously, they are in charge. And you say, oh, you can't trust a word he says. Labour aren't in charge. When Labour are in charge, we can nail them to the wall about what they say versus what they do. They're currently in opposition. They're not in charge. These clanging clowns have been in charge for the last 13 years. And Rishi Sunak, they're saying, oh, but that report was done for 2019, 2020. Yes, when your party were in charge of the country. Oh, but we've improved since. I mean, it's just pathetic. It's absolutely. It's like a kid getting an E in their A levels and going, well, you know, I did better than they thought I was going to do. You still got a bloody E.
He comes here protesting that nothing's his fault, trying to convince anyone who's still listening
nothing's
that
his fault.
Everything is great. The truth is, the floor fell in for millions of families because of their economic mayhem.
That's
the
true.
classroom ceilings collapsed because he cut vital school budgets. And now the walls of our national security have been breached because they've ignored repeated warnings.
Yes.
No one voted for these shambles.
Ooh, says shambles.
Voted for
I'm
him.
going to see something else then.
So how much more damage do the British public have to put up with before he finally finds the stomach to give them a say?
Yeah? Cowards. Come on, you cowardly cretin.
We are getting on for the British public just in the last week, announcing a new landmark deal for British scientists.
Really?
Attracting £600 million of new investment for our world-leading auto industry, and wages now rising at the fastest rate on record, Mr. Speaker. And where has he been this week?
From a low
Locked away
base.
with Labour's union paymasters.
Okay, your paymasters are the Russians, mate. Your paymasters are the oil companies, the tobacco companies, the arms manufacturers. I don't think you should be accusing Labour in a bad tone of saying, oh, well, you're funded by the unions, by the, you know, the Jews paid by working people. What you should be funded by is by, you know, shadowy billionaires and think tanks who we don't know who funds them. Yeah, that's who should be funding you. You should be getting tennis lessons with a tennis match, with Russian spies and going to their parties and stuff like that. That's what you should be doing. This is what he does every week. He goes, oh yeah, but you're being paid by the unions. Like, yeah, we are. That's a good thing. Oh, you want Britain to become more socialist? Yes, we do. We desperately do. But the one thing he does more than anything else, he just doesn't take any responsibility for the absolute cluster F that has been this country's perpetual state of crisis for the last 13 years.
Promising to give them more power and scrap the laws that protect British families and their access to public services. It's clear it's only the Conservatives that are on the side of the hard-working British public.
Side of the billionaires, mate.
Thank you very much,
Foreign
Mr. Speaker.
billionaires.
Last week, with Yorkshire colleagues, I met with our local integrated care board to discuss plans for improving dentistry provision. But when surgery is suddenly closed to NHS patients without notice, as one in Harrogate did very recently, an immediate strain is put on local provision. Will the Prime Minister look at what can be done in these circumstances
to make money out of the situation?
No one is left without access to an NHS dentist.
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend is absolutely right to raise this, and we will look into this issue. He'll be reassured to know we're investing £3 billion a year into dentistry. There is no geographical restriction on which dental practice a patient may attend, and practices should keep all their records up to date, including whether they are accepting new patients. And typically where a practice ends a contract, NHS England and ICBs should work together to ensure that that funding is reallocated and patients continue to have access to NHS dental care.
NHS dentistry is still massively underfunded.
Mr. Speaker, as someone who spends more money heating their swimming pool than the total value of the UK state pension, I think it's safe to say that the Prime Minister might not be as invested in this topic as some others. But let's afford him the opportunity to clear up any confusion. Will he commit his party, the Conservative Party, to maintaining the state pension triple lock beyond the next general election? Yes or no?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this is the party that introduced the triple lock, Mr. Speaker. This is the party that has delivered a £3,000 increase in the state pension since 2010. It's also the parties that ensure that there are 200,000 fewer pensioners living in poverty today, and this winter ensuring that pensioners get an extra £300 alongside their winter fuel payment to support them through the challenging times with inflation. So, Mr. Speaker, our track record is clear. There is one party in this House that has always stood up for our pensioners, and that is the Conservative Party.
So he didn't answer the question, did he?
Mr. Speaker, I don't think we heard a yes there. And you'll imagine my shock, my utter surprise that we appear to have consensus once again between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party on this most important of issues, despite the promises that were made
they're not
to the
scared
people
of the Conservatives in Scotland because they don't really present a threat. Labour presents a threat to the SNP
now. Your pension is to remain within the UK. How hollow those words are now. So may I ask
I wish you'd just keep his ire for the Tories.
The state pension triple lock first? His government or the Labour Party's government?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, thanks to the actions of this government, pensioners in Scotland are receiving record increases in their state pension, £870 this year. Extra support with the cost of living this winter. This is the government that introduced and remains committed to the triple lock. But he does raise a good point, Mr. Speaker. Pensioners in Scotland should know the reason they can rely on the state pension, not just today but for years to come, because of the strength of our union and the strength of our United Kingdom government.
All right, mate, if you say so.
Speaker, beautiful Eastbourne is perhaps best known as a top visitor destination, but there is important work being done also to put us on the digital map. DigiFest, the first local event of its kind, is coming to the Welcome Building next week and will showcase some pretty stellar local tech talent and open doors of opportunity with an ambition to create 10,000 local jobs in this sector. Would the Prime Minister applaud event organisers Chalk, Eastbourne and Switchplane and lay out what this government is doing to make sure Great Britain and Eastbourne is one of the best places in the world to be involved in this continually groundbreaking sector.
She was educated at Bereford House School, a private day and boarding school for girls aged 6 to 18. So I'll be adding her to the private school mafia list after the show.
I'm delighted to join my honourable friend in
Thank you very much for the €5 super chat there, Brian. Who do you want, Sunak or Barabbas? And McFarage prize.
This is a great example of how in local areas we can bring together people to create jobs and opportunity and ultimately...
I'll take anyone over the Tories right now.
Wants to see.
Vlad the Impaler. Bring back Attila the Hun.
Last year, after being referred by their GP, 22,000 people waited more than 4 months to start urgent treatment for cancer. A terrible wait, twice as long as the government's maximum 62-day pledge. A cancer target it hasn't met once since 2015. We all have loved ones whose lives have been turned upside down by cancer. And we all know that every day counts. Waiting reduces the chances of survival. So will the Prime Minister tell people waiting anxiously to start their cancer treatment, when will this cancer target be met?
Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, it's absolutely right that we do everything we can to speed up cancer diagnosis. The pandemic has had a significant impact on cancer recovery. He'll know that before the pandemic we had something like 200,000 cancer referrals a month, but during the pandemic it dropped to around 80,000, and now as those referrals come through, that's having an impact. But, Mr. Speaker, we're ensuring that there are hundreds more oncologists and radiologists working this year compared to last year. We're rolling out over 160 community diagnostic centres, because the honourable gentleman is right that early diagnosis is key, and that is why, Mr. Speaker, even though there is work to do, cancer treatment today is at record levels. So we are making progress, and the 62-day backlog is now falling. Recently, the NHS wrote to all trusts, streamlining our targets, clinically advised, and now all the focus is on meeting them as quickly as possible.
Chris Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 2017, Bolton Custody Suite was closed by the Police and Crime Commissioner and the then Chief Constable because they had given up on arresting criminals. The new Chief is delivering on the people's priorities that emergency calls are answered promptly, crimes are investigated and arrests are made, which means the newly reopened custody suite is always full. Will my right honourable friend join me in thanking Greater Manchester Police? And does he think that this approach ought to catch on around the country?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I am delighted with the improvements that have been made in Greater Manchester Police, and indeed the Home Secretary just recently met with the Chief there. They have made significant improvements to answering 999
Conservative
calls, for example,
for
and have
Bolton.
seen almost a 50%
Why would you vote for these
increase
creeps?
in the number of charges recorded by the force. I very much welcome their focus on getting the basics on crime and antisocial behaviour right, and they are a model for police forces across the country.
Ashley Dalton.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Prime Minister for his answer to the Honourable Member for Aberdeen South, but I'm still confused on this matter because just yesterday the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions said that the pensions triple lock is not sustainable. The Chancellor's economic advisers have suggested that it is time to review the policy, but Number 10, when questioned, have said they're committed to it. So, Mr. Speaker, which is it?
Mr. Speaker, this government is committed to the triple lock. It was this government that introduced the triple lock.
Okay, so you're committed to it.
I want to have a word with her own deputy leader, who I don't think provided clarity on the matter.
So you're not going to get rid of it then?
I think we all remember when it came to pensions, what we can remember is Gordon Brown's 75p a week increase.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Labour brought in minimum wage.
Businesses in my constituency of Meriden, I hear about how
the economy doubled under Labour.
Transforming the way we work in
doubled.
sectors like life sciences, the automotive sector, and financial services. Does my right honourable friend agree that artificial intelligence will transform the way humanity will live in the 21st century? And through his upcoming global AI summit, will he ensure that appropriate guardrails are put in place to protect society as we become world leaders in this technology?
Okay.
My honourable friend is right to highlight the incredible power of AI to transform not just businesses and our productivity, but also public services in areas like health and education. But we do need guardrails to allow us to make the most of the opportunities of AI and to address risks. Our regulatory approach sets out a responsible and proportionate approach to AI that balances risk and innovation, and I look forward to working with
I don't even think you know what AI is, mate.
At a global level at our upcoming AI Safety Summit.
Cooper.
Thank you, Mr.
Batty
Speaker.
there was
Luton
he was a
Airport
rabid
is trying to
Brexiteer, by the
massively
way.
expand its airport capacity from 18 million passengers per year to a whopping 32 million passengers per year. This will blight the lives of thousands of residents across Hertfordshire and Bedfordshire, and especially in North St Albans, who live under the flight paths, but it will also fly in the face of the advice from the government's own climate advisers. It's been reported that the Prime Minister is getting ready to ignore his climate advisers. Is that true?
No, Mr. Speaker, but what I would say is my approach to getting to net zero is not one that requires people to give up doing the things that they want to do and enjoying, like flying. The right thing to be doing is, as we are, investing in new technologies
flies in his private jet every day.
Things like sustainable aviation fuel.
You pay for, by the way.
That's how we'll decarbonise aviation.
There's no such thing as sustainable aviation fuel. We can't make enough for the planes we've got. pie in the sky nonsense, lies.
He put the full might of the Treasury behind the 10-year drug strategy, which with its ADA project is now turning lives around across England.
Gammon.
But a key part of that strategy was developing a new approach to possession. He will know from his own constituency that in towns like Andover in mine, possession is of a huge concern, particularly to parents of young people who spend some time in the town centre. Now, the Home Office issued a white paper on this over a year ago. The consultation closed in October last year. So can I ask the Prime Minister to commit that in the forthcoming King's Speech we can see some legislation to finally deal with this pernicious problem?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank my right honourable friend for all of his work and attention on this area. It was good to work with him on Project ADA in particular. He's right to highlight that drugs destroy lives and families, hitting the most vulnerable in our society the hardest. The 10-year drug strategy, which he helped put in place, is ambitious and backed with a record £3 billion funding. As my right honourable friend highlighted, we have consulted on a new drug possession offences framework, and I can assure him that ministers will keep him and this House updated on future plans.
Kate Alone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the last few hours, I've been contacted by the head teacher of St James's Church of England Primary School in Blackburn. The head teacher is desperately seeking help after a RAC survey conducted on the 7th of September was inconclusive. The urgent intrusive inspection that was supposed to follow has not been arranged by the Department of Education. The potentially affected part of the building has been closed off, with children crammed into a dining room.
I'm going on a diet by eating as much as I want.
Staff are unable to access facilities, and the whole school has been hugely inconvenienced. The head teacher has been unable. The head teacher has been unable to reach the Department of Education. Can I implore the Prime Minister to get the Secretary of State to Education to investigate this urgently?
The Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course, I'm sorry for the disruption at schools as we work hard to identify those affected. But what DfE is doing is fully funding the inspection process, ensuring that we are rapidly now inspecting and surveying all potentially affected schools, paying for that work, but also now with the increase of up to 80 dedicated caseworkers, St James's Primary School, like others, should have a dedicated point of contact to work through those issues. I'll ensure that the Secretary
Are you going to fix thousands of schools, mate, with 80 staff? I mean, just much more resources than that.
Personally, I know the stark impact dementia and the effect it has on the families of our million citizens who live with it. It was my honour last week to sponsor Alzheimer's research here in the UK to highlight the recent progress on a new diagnostic test and new drugs that could be available as early as next January. I welcome dementia's inclusion in the government's major condition strategy. But would my right honourable friend ask his Secretary of State to convene a dementia medicines task force so that we can take advantage of this progress in research? And would he consider Alzheimer's Research's request for a dementia champion?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, can I start by thanking my honourable friend for his work in this important area. Regulators are working closely with industry to evaluate new dementia medicines because, of course, we want patients to benefit from rapid access to safe and effective treatments. We're also strongly committed to funding dementia research, including doubling the amount allocated to this to £160 million a year by next year. And last year we launched the Dame Barbara Windsor Dementia Mission, backed up with new funding, which will work with industry to develop biomarkers, data and digital science innovations, and strengthen our trials in dementia. And I look forward to hearing from him more suggestions about.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In the 1990s, under the Conservative government, people were dying because of the length of time they were waiting on NHS waiting lists. In 2023, we've seen an increasing number of people dying while they're on NHS waiting lists before they get treatment. Is the Prime Minister ashamed that people are dying needlessly under his watch?
No, because he knows no shame. Well, it's a man who knows no shame.
Speaker, of course, the number on waiting lists has been impacted significantly by the pandemic, but that's why we've put record funding in place.
Record funding. He said record funding.
Including new innovations like surgical hubs, same-day emergency care, virtual wards, and such like. But I would gently point out to the honourable gentleman, in England, partly the reason that the waiting lists are not coming down as fast as we would like is because of strike action by doctors. Something that is
it's the doctor's fault.
And his colleagues who have stood on the picket lines, ensuring that patients cannot get access to care.
Ensuring that doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals get the money that they need to live.
Guarantee patients safe access to medical treatment.
How about you pay? How about you pay? How about you stop? How about you stop the strikes?
Why is it that he believes patients should
You won't even talk to them. You won't even talk to the doctors, the nurses. You won't even talk to them. You're their employer, and you won't even talk to them. Question 11.
Mr. Speaker, we regularly engage with local partners across the West Midlands to gather insight and intelligence on the economy.
What recent assessment has been made for the economic outlook for the West Midlands?
The Trailblazer devolution deal, which will help include measures to help businesses thrive.
Shameless gremlin.
And I see that just the other week, Business Growth West Midlands was launched by the Mayor, backed with £100 million in funding for business support.
The drug dealer told the Tory member give him £10.
I thank the Prime Minister for that answer. And I'm glad to hear that the West Midlands growth continues to expand.
How'd you get 2 questions?
However, we do have a problem in Lichfield, and that is road closures. And we don't know how long they're going to go on for.
How are you, sir?
We don't know how long
it's
they're
a
going
mockery
to go
of the whole
on for.
system.
HS2 are doing these closures. One hand doesn't know what the other hand is saying.
Look at his swearing eyes.
HS2.
One of your eyes doesn't know what the other eye is doing. You swivel-eyed lunatic.
I've ever had to deal with. Will the Prime Minister,
You're in the Tory party, mate.
short term, try and restructure HS2 so it works like a company should? And in the longer term, can he save other constituencies by stopping HS2 at the end of phase 1?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know that the frustration that this is causing to my honourable friend's constituents. I am told that HS2 Limited is prioritising the completion of works underway to keep disruption to a minimum, including roadworks in Lichfield. But I know the Transport Secretary will continue to hold them to account.
Can't take him seriously, can you?
Keep local communities informed about future works.
Mr. Speaker, UK bill payers are facing an extra £1 billion because of the government's failure to agree new offshore wind. With Russia using energy as a weapon, when will the Prime Minister take energy security seriously and protect us from the whims of fossil fuel autocrats?
Mr. Speaker, we do take energy security seriously. Indeed, we created a brand new department to focus on energy security. But it's a bit rich. It's a bit rich coming from the Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, that wants to cut off our access to homegrown British oil and gas, Mr. Speaker, which will increase our reliance on foreign oil and gas, increase our reliance on dictators and exposure to those markets, and as the independent reports have also said, will be bad for the climate, as those imported fossil fuels come with something like 2 or 3 times the emissions.
No, we want to move away from fossil fuels and towards renewables that we can just make for ourselves.
Thank you,
Transport.
Mr. Speaker.
He's bothered about transport. He's bothered about oil miles.
This week brings added urgency to the regeneration of our town centres and driving that forward.
Yeah.
Would you agree to me
Who destroyed it in the first place, Tory boy? Come on. Come on. Who
Who
destroyed it in the first place? You cream-faced loon.
Well, Mr. Speaker, investment through both arms of our Towns Fund is part of how we will regenerate and unleash the potential of our town centres. I'm delighted to hear that investment includes Torbay's.
We know everything's going awfully, but we're doing better than we were last year, kind of, I think. I'm not sure.
The Future High Streets Fund. But my honourable friend is right about ensuring that our planning system
You have destroyed the high streets. These people destroyed the high streets. That's who did it.
To convert unused shops into cafes, restaurants, or indeed new homes. And it's an example of how we're helping.
Just kind of think of new ways to launder money for your Russian overlords, the Russian oligarchs who own the Tory party.
Saying that there could be RAC present in military buildings. So can the Prime Minister today guarantee the safety of our military personnel and equipment, or is this yet another ticking time bomb that the government has failed to see coming?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, actually across the public sector, departments make sure that they follow the technical guidance with regard to RAC, identify and mitigate as required. And as you've seen with example in the NHS, we have moved hospitals affected into the new hospital programme. But also, more generally, this is the government that has invested record sums in defence, £24 billion at the last spending review, the single biggest uplift in defence spending since the end of the Cold War.
Philip Davis.
After massive cuts.
It's vitally important that we retain, recruit and protect our prison officers. So will the Prime Minister agree to stop any prisoner who assaults a prison officer from being released early from jail? This simple measure will be very popular with prison officers. It will be very popular with the public. And you never know, Mr. Speaker, it might even find favour with the parties opposite, who normally think that the only people who should be in prison are people who misgender people.
Oh, fuck off.
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend,
no one is in jail for misgendering anyone, you stupid little bunchback
should
toad.
face the full consequences of their actions. I'm pleased that the recent Police Crime Sentencing in Courts Act actually increased the maximum penalty.
What an arsehole.
2 years
What an
imprisonment
sorry for
those
swearing.
who assault
What an
emergency
absolute
workers,
arsehole.
and that includes prison officers.
He went from talking about a serious issue about prison officers being assaulted by prisoners to make a joke about transgender people.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Joke at
seven
transgender
global
people's
economic powers came together, including
expense.
India, the US, and the EU, to agree a monumental trade agreement, but not the UK.
Yeah.
Can the Prime Minister say if he chose not to sign up because he thought it was presumably a bad deal, or was the UK left out altogether because this Prime Minister has as weak a reputation on the world stage as he does at home?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure if the Honourable Lady was here for the statement on Monday. I rather assume not. I think what she's describing wasn't a trade deal, so first of all she should get her facts right. And as I explained on Monday,
wasn't a trade deal.
There are lots
it
of
was actually a trade deal.
Countries will participate.
It was a deal to facilitate trade. It was a trade deal. Just to make that absolutely clear, this is to facilitate trade between India, the Middle East, and Europe. And it was backed by the USA as a bulwark against the Belt and Road Initiative of China. Now, this guy here is saying that it's not a trade. Technically, it's not a trade thing. It is a trade thing. We were left out of it. We were left out of it because of Brexit and these bunch of clowns that no one wants to do business with.
In solving international issues. We at the same conference that she mentioned, the same summit, we announced a record investment to the Green Climate Fund. It is the single biggest investment by this country to help with international climate finance, and it was warmly welcomed by countries at the summit who can see that the UK is taking a leadership role and helping countries adapt and mitigate.
He's just talking out of his pants here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week we were hit by the devastating news that all Wilko stores would be closing, meaning the loss of 12,500 jobs. And Bassetlaw and Worksop are the home of Wilko's HQ and a distribution centre with 1,500 jobs set to go. But Wilko has been mismanaged for years. And in the last decade, over 77 million has been paid out to shareholders. And recently, the HQ was sold for 48 million before being leased back. So can the Prime Minister reassure my constituents and all those nationally affected by the demise of Wilko
Why did you allow them to go away with
the
it?
government will do everything in their power to help support people?
If only there was some kind of, I don't know, some kind of like oversight, some kind of government that could actually bring in rules to stop this kind of behaviour. If only. I mean, what could they do? I mean, they've only been in charge of the country for the last 13 frickin' years.
People into jobs and make sure their redundancies and pensions are protected, and we will take whatever action is available to us to hold the ownership to account.
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as my honourable friend knows, some of the topics that he raised will be commercial matters for the company, but I do know that this is a concerning time for workers at Wilko. My right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, is keeping close to developments, and we have already started supporting those who have been made redundant, and we stand ready to support others to the fullest of our abilities.
Lillian Greenwood.
The head of the Army, General Sir Patrick Sanders, has said the UK must forge an army capable of fighting alongside our allies and defeating Russia in battle. So why is the government still pushing ahead with further cuts of 10,000 troops to the British Army?
Yeah. Go on, why are you doing that?
Again, I'd say
Because your Russian paymasters have told you to. Your Russian paymasters,
put a record
Rishi.
amount into our armed forces, £24 billion.
24 billion. This guy's worth over 700 million pounds. I just want to make this really clear that 500 million pounds of his fortune, him and his wife's fortune that they have, £500 million that they individually have, is in Infosys. Infosys is a big Indian tech company that should not be trading with Russia anymore because of sanctions. But it is. And this man and his wife are making money every single second of every minute of every hour of every day from the fact that Infosys still continues to trade with Russia. So whose side do you think this man is on in the war? Do you think he's on the side of Ukraine? Do you think he's on the side of NATO? Or do you think he's on the side of his own freaking bank balance? I'll leave it up to you to decide.
Remain the second largest investor in our defence in NATO, and as we saw at the NATO summit, other countries look to us for leadership. How the armed forces allocate that record funding is a matter for chiefs to make sure that we have the capabilities we need to meet the threats of today.
Never take responsibility.
That they will make, and we will back
Never
them.
take
But
responsibility.
No one can doubt our commitment to funding properly the armed forces.
I think everyone can. I think everyone can doubt that, Rishi. Rishi, pretty sure everyone can doubt that.
Said that democracies like the UK, not authoritarian regimes, should lead the fight on global challenges like development and climate change. So because the links between failed regimes, climate change and the numbers of asylum seekers are growing, would my right honourable friend ensure that doing development democratically is a key theme in the White Paper on International Development? And would he also visit the Westminster Foundation's Garden of Democracy exhibition here in Parliament to highlight our promotion of democratic values abroad?
Prime Minister. Can I thank my honourable friend for highlighting the exhibition in Portcullis House, and I know members will have heard his invitation. We are consulting widely on the detail of the White Paper on International Development and what it should say, including specifically the role of democracy in development, and I'd encourage all interested organisations and individuals to share their ideas through the public consultation.
Can I just say thank you to Sir John Benjer and his final PMQs and his loyal service to the House. We do appreciate it. Thank you, Sir John.
Bye, Sir John. All right, it's all over. It's all over, Red Rover. So there you go. That was Prime Minister's questions on this quite sunny Wednesday afternoon. I hope you enjoyed that as far as this Live Fest can be enjoyed by people who, I don't know, care about things like the truth, decency, being a good person, honour, loyalty, things that the Tories just don't really understand. They don't get. They just care about money. That's all they care about. All I'll ever care about. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for my super chat. And Phil Moorhouse will be back at 9:30 in the morning for Morning Brew. Hopefully he's feeling a little bit better than he was yesterday. And until then, I'll say thank you so much for watching. Hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.